7 shadow signs your dark vibration is entering overdrive. There's a moment in every awakened soul's path where the shift becomes so intense, so subtle, and so spiritually violent that we don't even realize we're spiraling, because it doesn't look like destruction. It looks like power. It feels like potency. It even comes dressed in clarity. And yet, underneath it all, something is twisting. The shadow is no longer just present in the background, it's moving forward, taking over, and doing it in silence. That's when your dark vibration enters overdrive. And if you don't know the signs, if you don't catch them early, you'll confuse your descent for ascension. You'll celebrate your unraveling. You'll spiritualize your self-destruction. And by the time you realize the truth, it may take years to undo. We're not talking about shadow in the pop spiritual sense, the aesthetic darkness, the cool mysticism, or the glamorized dark night of the soul posts you scroll through online. No, this is deeper. This is the ancient primal energy that lives in all of us, the part of you that remembers being betrayed, being abandoned, being feared. The part of you that learned to survive by becoming sharp, silent, and sovereign. The shadow is not evil, it is not wrong, but it is raw. And when your vibration starts to accelerate, when you begin accessing higher frequencies of energy, power, and awareness, your shadow doesn't disappear. It gets amplified. And that's the danger, because now it's not just your pain reacting, it's your power reacting through pain.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
So how do you know when your dark vibration has entered overdrive? The signs are there. They're always there. But they don't scream. They whisper. And the first sign, perhaps the most seductive, is hyperintuition turned paranoia. You start picking up more signals, more cues, more energy in the room. Your sensitivity goes through the roof. You know things before they happen. You feel people's motives before they speak. But that beautiful gift begins to twist. You stop trusting anyone. You start seeing darkness everywhere. Your mind starts creating patterns where none exist. You wake up in the middle of the night convinced something is off. You read into texts, glances, silences. You stop listening to what people say and only hear what you're afraid they might mean. What began as divine intuition becomes a prison of mistrust. Ask yourself how much of what I think I'm sensing is actually fear in disguise. The second shadow sign is emotional over-identification. Your emotions become louder, faster, more intense. Anger comes in tidal waves. Sadness hits with no warning. You cry, then feel euphoric, then spiral again, all within hours. And instead of observing these waves, you become them. You start to say things like, I am angry, instead of I feel anger. You forget that emotions are energy in motion, not your identity. And when you're in overdrive, your nervous system becomes addicted to these spikes. You think it's depth. You think you're feeling fully. But really you're being hijacked. Your shadow loves this, because the more you feel out of control, the more it justifies its grip on your decisions. So ask yourself, when was the last time I felt something without becoming it? Now, let's move to the third sign, spiritual superiority disguised as sovereignty. This one is subtle and brutal. You start to isolate. You tell yourself it's because you're protecting your energy. You say people don't get you anymore. And in many ways that's true. But beneath the boundary is a belief that you're above them. That your path is purer. That your vibration is higher. And that belief feeds the shadow. It creates a hierarchy where none exists. It disconnects you from the very source that brought you here, humility. And the longer you let this grow, the more toxic it becomes. You'll stop receiving. You'll stop reflecting. You'll stop evolving because the ego has hijacked your awakening and put itself on the throne. So pause and ask, am I setting boundaries, or am I building walls to protect my illusion of being ahead? The fourth sign is one almost no one talks about: obsessive spiritual consumption with no integration. You start watching every video, reading every book, following every teacher. You need more information, more downloads, more tools, more systems. And at first it feels expansive, but then you begin to feel anxious, unstable, like you're falling behind, like you'll never know enough. That's not expansion. That's spiritual overdrive. You're using knowledge to avoid embodiment. You're consuming to escape the discomfort of being with yourself. And the shadow loves this because it convinces you that you're doing the work when really you're just building a mental fortress to avoid the truth you already know. The truth that doesn't need to be studied, it needs to be lived. So ask, what am I avoiding by constantly seeking? Fifth, and perhaps the most dangerous, is the glamorization of suffering. You begin to wear your pain like proof. You start believing that the more you suffer, the more sacred your path must be. You romanticize your breakdowns. You turn your trauma into identity. You confuse pain with purpose. Yes, pain is part of the path. Yes, shadow work requires depth. But if you begin to cling to suffering as a badge of authenticity, you're no longer healing, you're self-arming with spiritual language. The shadow convinces you that without pain you are nothing. But the truth is, real power is not in how much you've suffered. It's in how much you've transcended without losing your heart. So ask, have I mistaken my wounds for wisdom? The sixth sign is energetic retaliation. When your vibration is in overdrive, you start to unconsciously weaponize your energy. You think about someone and they text. You get angry and their life falls apart. You begin to notice that your thoughts, your focus, your energy moves things. And instead of using it with care, you begin to use it with ego. You want to be seen. You want to be felt. You want to be avenged. And the shadow convinces you it's justified. But your power was never meant to punish. It was meant to liberate. So ask, am I using my energy to control others or to set them free? The final sign, the seventh, is emotional numbness masked as detachment. You tell yourself you've transcended. You say, I don't react anymore. You call it peace, but really you're shut down. You've buried the chaos so deep that not even you can feel it. You're not calm. You're frozen. You're not detached. You're disconnected. And the shadow smiles, because as long as you're numb, you won't question. You won't feel. You won't heal. So ask, am I truly at peace, or have I just silenced the parts of me that were crying out? These are the 7 shadow signs. If even one of them is resonating right now, it's not a reason to fear. It's a reason to pause, to slow down, to come back to center, because your power is real. Your darkness is sacred. But when it moves into overdrive, it begins to consume instead of create. And the only way to return to balance is to see clearly. How the shadow hijacks power, the secret war between your energy and your identity. Once you've recognized the signs that your dark vibration is entering overdrive, the next truth is even more confronting. Your shadow doesn't just linger in the background. It strategizes. It adapts. It learns how to wear your growth like a disguise. It hijacks your power not by opposing it, but by mirroring it. That's what makes this part of the journey so dangerous, because the more powerful you become, the more clever your shadow becomes at hiding inside that power. It doesn't scream, I'm here to sabotage you. It whispers, I am you. And if you're not deeply aware, you'll fall for it. Over and over again. This is the secret war, the one most people never realize they're fighting. And it's not a war of good versus evil. It's a war of identity versus essence. Your identity is the collection of survival strategies you've adopted over time, how you've learned to be seen, to be safe, to be enough. But your essence is something deeper. It's your untouchable source, your pure signal. And your shadow knows that your identity is easier to manipulate than your essence. So what does it do? It attaches itself to the parts of your identity that you mistake for your truth. It seduces you through your own story. Let me explain. You start to build something meaningful, maybe a spiritual practice, a platform, a presence. People begin to recognize your insight, your energy, your depth. And slowly, without realizing it, your identity starts to merge with your role. You become the healer, the teacher, the guide. You start to believe that your worth is tied to your impact. But here's what happens. The moment your identity attaches itself to your power, your shadow begins to stretch through it. You stop being curious. You stop being humble. You stop being real. And instead of leading from essence, you start performing from identity. This is how the shadow hijacks light, by convincing you that being seen is the same as being yourself. That external validation equals alignment. And when your vibration is in overdrive, you don't notice, because the feedback feels good. The numbers go up. The energy moves. But deep inside, something feels hollow. Like you're speaking truth but lost your voice. Like you're moving energy but not rooted in it. That dissonance builds quietly. You keep going, but now you're serving the audience, not the mission. You're feeding the algorithm, not the soul. And it's not just in your work, it's in your relationships too. The shadow hijacks your need for connection. It tells you that your intuition should always be trusted, even when it's clouded by trauma. It tells you that your boundaries are sacred, even when they're built from fear. It tells you that your solitude is healing, even when it's just hiding. The shadow knows how to dress up dysfunction in spiritual language. It knows how to make you feel empowered while you're actually avoiding your deepest wounds. And the longer you let it run wild, the more you'll convince yourself that you're evolving, when really, you're just becoming a more refined version of who you were always afraid to outgrow. So what do we do? How do we reclaim power from the shadow without rejecting the shadow itself? We start by telling the truth. Not the truth we post, the real truth. The one we whisper at night when no one's watching. The one that says, I'm scared, I'm tired, I don't know who I am without this. That truth is the doorway out of overdrive, because it brings you back to humility, to stillness, to the essence underneath all the noise. And once you touch that essence again, you can start to separate the voice of the shadow from the voice of the soul. Here's the key: your soul speaks softly, but clearly. It doesn't need to prove. It doesn't need to defend. It just is. The shadow, on the other hand, is loud, reactive, urgent. It wants to be right. It wants to win. So the next time you feel triggered, ask yourself, am I protecting my truth or protecting my identity? That one question can reveal everything. This is the secret war inside all of us, and it will never fully go away. But it doesn't need to, because the goal isn't to destroy the shadow, it's to lead it, to bring it into alignment, to make it serve the higher mission instead of sabotaging it. When your essence leads, your shadow becomes a tool, a source of fire, a compass that points toward the parts of you still unclaimed. But when your identity leads, your shadow becomes a parasite feeding off your light and calling it progress. So I ask you now, what part of your power are you still outsourcing to your identity? What would happen if you let go of the role, the image, the performance, and return to the raw, unfiltered presence underneath it all? That's the beginning of liberation, not from the shadow but through it. The collapse of control, why your life falls apart right before the shift. There's a moment in every deep spiritual transformation that almost no one warns you about. It's not the bliss. It's not the clarity. It's not the feeling of being one with the universe. It's the collapse, the breaking, the unraveling of everything you thought was safe, stable, solid. And what's most terrifying is that it often happens right before the shift, right before the quantum leap, the spiritual upgrade, the new frequency. It's like life is pulling the rug from underneath your feet and you're left wondering, why now? I've done the work. I've healed. I've aligned. So why is everything falling apart? Here's the truth that changes everything. Your higher self doesn't care about your comfort, it cares about your capacity. And when your vibration starts to shift into its next level, your reality must reorganize itself to match that new frequency. That reorganization is never neat, it's never quiet, and it's rarely what you expect. The people around you may suddenly feel distant. Opportunities that once lit you up now feel empty. The plans you made start to dissolve. That's not failure. That's frequency mismatch. The energetic structure of your life can no longer hold the new version of you trying to be born. But if you don't understand this, you'll resist it. You'll try to hold on to the crumbling pieces. You'll call it sabotage. You'll call it bad luck. You'll call it a sign that you're doing something wrong. But what if I told you it's the opposite? What if the collapse is the proof that you're doing something right? You see, when your dark vibration enters overdrive, it's not just a personal experience. It becomes a systemic one. Your energy affects everything: your relationships, your work, your health, your environment. And when that energy becomes too dense, too fast, too unintegrated, life has no choice but to break open the systems that can no longer support your expansion. This is why the collapse feels violent, because part of you is still attached to the old structure. You've identified with who you were. You've built your life around it. And suddenly that version of you is dissolving, not because it was wrong, but because it was complete. And now your resistance to letting go becomes the very thing that prolongs the chaos. You start grasping for control, for certainty. You beg for clarity. But clarity doesn't come when you cling, it comes when you surrender. And that's the paradox of true power. The more you try to hold it, the more it slips through your fingers. But the moment you let go, you become the channel. So here's the question we rarely ask ourselves at rock bottom. What if this collapse is not the end, but the exact cracking open my next level needs? When everything begins to fall apart, your shadow will scream. It will try to rebuild the old patterns. It will seduce you into going back to the relationship that felt safe, back to the job that kept you small, back to the identity that was familiar. But your soul is not interested in your comfort zone. Your soul wants expansion, and expansion requires destruction not as punishment but as preparation. There's a term in spiritual physics, structural tension. It's the gap between who you are and who you're becoming. That gap creates pressure, and pressure creates movement. When your vibration is in overdrive, that tension becomes unbearable. And if you don't channel it into conscious change, life will do it for you. The breakup, the breakdown, the financial crash, the health scare. These aren't random. These are sacred interventions. The universe is not punishing you. It's clearing space. Because your next level can't be built on yesterday's foundation. It's too small, too fragile, too rooted in the version of you that no longer exists. But here's where it gets real. The collapse doesn't guarantee the shift. You can still miss it. You can still fall into bitterness, blame, and victimhood. You can still tell yourself the story that life is against you. And if you do, you'll rebuild the same structure in a new form. Same lessons, same pain, new disguise. That's the cycle most people live in for years. But if you choose to pause to witness the falling apart, Without rushing to fix it, you create the space for something miraculous. You allow the new blueprint to emerge, and that blueprint is not created through logic. It's received through stillness. You have to trust the intelligence of your own soul. You have to believe that the part of you that brought you to this collapse already knows the path forward. But it doesn't speak through panic. It speaks through presence. It whispers when you finally stop screaming. It appears when you stop trying to be strong and finally surrender to the sacred unknown. So I'll ask you now, what are you still trying to hold together that your soul is asking you to let fall apart? And what would really happen if you stopped fighting the collapse and started listening to it? This is the death before the rebirth, the darkness before the dawn, the last breath before the leap. And if you can find the courage to stay conscious in the chaos, you'll discover the deepest truth of all. You were never breaking. You were becoming. The alchemy of the abyss, turning overdrive into sacred power. Once the collapse has stripped away everything false, you're left with something so raw, so silent, it can't be named. It's not clarity yet. It's not peace. It's the void, the abyss, a space that feels both terrifying and sacred, like you're floating between who you were and who you're meant to be. And this is where most people either run or rise, because the abyss doesn't offer certainty. It doesn't offer instant rewards. It offers alchemy, the chance, the rare, sacred chance to transmute your overdrive into true power. But alchemy doesn't happen through knowledge alone. It happens through willingness, through presence, through the conscious choice to sit with everything you once tried to escape. You begin to realize that the chaos was never random. The shadow signs weren't obstacles, they were invitations. Every moment your energy spun out of control, every time your emotions overwhelmed you, every time your identity collapsed, it was all the setup for this moment. The moment where you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And instead ask, what part of me is ready to be transformed by this? That's the shift. That's the inner alchemist awakening. You no longer resist the shadow. You invite it. You stop trying to tame your dark vibration and instead train it. You begin to see that your intensity isn't a curse, it's an accelerator. Your fire isn't destructive, it's purifying. But it only becomes sacred when it's directed. Unconscious power is chaos. Conscious power is creation. When your shadow is seen, held, and integrated, it becomes the most precise tool in your spiritual arsenal. It knows where your wounds are. It knows your patterns. It knows your deepest fears. And when brought into alignment, it becomes your map, not your enemy. So how do we do it? How do we turn overdrive into sacred power? We begin by slowing down, not just physically, but energetically. We stop rushing our healing. We stop performing our peace. We stop trying to leap into the next level before we've truly embodied this one. Spiritual mastery isn't speed, it's depth. You can't skip the layers. You can't rush integration. You have to feel every part. The anger, the numbness, the doubt, the desire to give up, the shame you thought you buried. You have to sit with it all, not to fix it, but to witness it. Because awareness alone begins the transmutation. Next, we reclaim our body. When your vibration is in overdrive, your mind races ahead, but your body gets left behind. You live in your head, disconnected from your breath, from your belly, from your bones. But your body is the temple. It holds the codes. It's where transformation becomes real. So move. Breathe, shake, scream, dance, cry. Let your nervous system catch up to your evolution. Let your body remember that it's safe to hold power without collapsing. Then we cultivate sacred discipline, not the rigid, punishing kind, the devotional kind, the kind that says, I show up for myself, especially when I don't feel like it. You meditate not just to feel better, but to become clearer. You journal not just to vent, but to listen. You create daily rituals that keep your channel clean, your energy grounded, your vision focused. Because when you're consistent, your shadow can't sneak up on you. It becomes part of the rhythm. It becomes integrated into your leadership. And finally, we serve. Real power always leads to service, not because you need validation, but because your overflow demands to be shared. When you've transmuted your pain into wisdom, your fear into clarity, your chaos into stillness, you can't help but become a lighthouse. You don't preach, you embody. You don't convince, you radiate. And that becomes the true gift of the dark vibration. It doesn't just elevate you. It elevates everyone you touch, everyone you see, everyone who's on the edge of their own abyss, waiting for someone to show them what's possible on the other side. So let me leave you with this. The shadow signs were never warnings. They were reminders. They were reminders. Reminders that your depth is not a problem, that your darkness is not a flaw, that your overdrive was not a mistake, it was a calling. And now you've answered it. You've survived the storm. You've seen the war within. You've let it break you, burn you, humble you. And now you rise, not as who you were, but as who you've always been underneath it all, fully integrated, fully awake, fully alive. This is the alchemy of the abyss. This is the power that cannot be faked. This is the vibration that changes worlds. And now you carry it. Use it well.